They framed a woman at a traffic stop. They had no idea she was a DEA agent.
DEA agent!
That's right. Your framing operation is over.
They thought she was just an easy target. A woman driving alone on a quiet night in a neighborhood she supposedly did not belong in. Officers Harlan Voss and Carver Lang had a quota to meet, a corrupt network to protect, and a long-standing reputation for bending the rules until they shattered. When they pulled her over, planted 2 ounces of crystal meth in her trunk, and slapped the cold steel cuffs on her wrists, they smiled, thinking they had ruined just another nameless life. What they did not know was that the quiet woman sitting in the back of their cruiser was not a helpless victim. She was Special Agent Lila Kane of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and these corrupt cops had just walked blindfolded into a federal trap. Lila Kane tapped her fingers against the steering wheel, matching the rhythm of the rain hitting the windshield. To anyone looking at her, she was Lila Kane, a weary shift worker heading home to the south side of Oak Haven, a Rust Belt city that had seen its best days decades ago. But beneath the faded denim jacket and the tired expression was a highly decorated DEA special agent with 10 years of federal service. Lila had been deep undercover for several months. Her assignment was to dismantle the Ironwood Pipeline, a massive fentanyl and methamphetamine distribution ring that had crippled Oak Haven. But the DEA had hit a wall. The dealers always seemed to be one step ahead of the raids. The evidence rooms were mysteriously losing inventory. It did not take a genius to realize the cartel had the local police in their pocket. Lila was embedded to find out exactly who was on the payroll. She did not have to look hard. They found her. As she turned onto the desolate stretch of Miller Avenue, the blinding flash of red and blue LED lights erupted in her rearview mirror. Her heart maintained a steady, trained rhythm. She pulled the Malibu over to the shoulder, shifted into park, and rolled down her window, keeping both hands clearly visible on the steering wheel. Through the rain-slicked side mirror, she watched 2 figures step out of a patrol cruiser. She recognized them immediately from her federal briefings. Officer Harlan Voss, a heavy-set man with a history of excessive force complaints that kept vanishing from internal affairs, and his partner, Officer Carver Lang, a wiry, nervous cop who played the role of the loyal attack dog. Harlan approached the driver's side, his heavy Maglite flashlight intentionally aimed right into Lila's eyes, temporarily blinding her. "License and registration," Harlan barked, not bothering with an introduction or a reason for the stop. "Is there a problem, officer?" Lila asked, pitching her voice slightly higher, injecting just the right amount of civilian anxiety into her tone. She slowly reached into the glove compartment and handed over her meticulously forged alias, a perfectly backstopped Ohio driver's license and registration in the name of Lila Kane. Harlan snatched the cards. He did not even look at them. He looked at her. "You swerved back there at the intersection. Looked like you were having trouble staying in your lane. Have you been drinking tonight?" "No, sir. Just heading home from work. The roads are slick." Carver, who had been lingering near the rear passenger door, suddenly stepped forward, sniffing the air with exaggerated theatricality. "Hey, Harlan, you smell that?" Harlan leaned in closer, his breath smelling of stale coffee and wintergreen tobacco. "Yeah, I smell it. Smells like unburned marijuana." Lila felt a cold, sharp spike of anger, but she kept her face blank. It was the oldest, cheapest lie in the corrupt cop playbook. The phantom smell that suddenly gave them fabricated probable cause to tear a civilian's life apart without a warrant. "Step out of the vehicle," Harlan ordered, his hand resting casually on the butt of his service weapon. "I do not have any marijuana in my car," Leela said, stepping out into the freezing drizzle. "Turn around, face the car, hands on the roof," Carver snapped, moving in quickly to pat her down. His pat-down was aggressively rough, bordering on invasive. Leela memorized every movement, every procedural violation, cataloging them for the federal indictment she was already building in her mind. "If you have nothing to hide, you will not mind us taking a look, right?" Harlan said with a smirk that did not reach his eyes. Without waiting for her consent, he popped the trunk of the Malibu. Leela stood silently against the cold metal of her car, watching the reflection in the cruiser's windshield. She knew exactly what was in her trunk: a spare tire, a broken umbrella, and some emergency jumper cables. But she also knew what was about to happen. She watched Carver rummage through the back. He leaned deep into the trunk, his shoulders blocking her view for just a fraction of a second. When he stood back up, he was holding a clear plastic evidence bag filled with large, jagged white crystals. "Well, well, well," Carver said, holding the bag up under the glare of the street lamp. "Looks like we hit the jackpot tonight. What do we have here?" "Looks like a couple ounces of ice." "That is not mine," Leela said, her voice shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of absolute suppressed rage. "You put that there. I saw you." Harlan laughed, a dry, harsh sound. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt, aggressively grabbing Lila's wrists and twisting her arms behind her back. The steel bit into her skin as he ratcheted them tight. "Save it for the judge, sweetheart," Harlan whispered, leaning into her ear. "You people always say it ain't yours. Let's see how much the public defender believes you." They shoved her into the hard plastic back seat of the cruiser. As the door slammed shut, locking her in the cage, Lila stared at the partition. They had planted narcotics to hit a quota, or perhaps simply to steal her car for the impound lot racket she knew they were running. They thought they held all the power. They thought she was a nobody. Lila took a slow, deep breath. "You boys have no idea," she thought. The trap just snapped shut. The ride to the 12th precinct was a masterclass in police misconduct, and Lila was taking mental notes. Harlan and Carver did not even bother turning off their dashcam audio. So confident were they in their untouchability. "Easy caller," Harlan chuckled from the driver's seat, accelerating through a yellow light. "Captain Hale is going to love this. That puts us 3 busts over for the month. Plus that Malibu's clean enough. We can get it processed for civil asset forfeiture soon. My cousin's dealership could use a cheap flip." "Think she'll squeal?" Carver asked, glancing at Lila in the rearview mirror. "Who? Her?" Harlan scoffed loudly. "Look at her. She is terrified. Give her a public defender with a stack of 50 cases, threaten her with 20 years for trafficking, and she will take a plea deal for 5 in the state pen before the ink dries on the arrest report. They always do." Leela sat slumped against the window, playing the part of the defeated suspect perfectly, but her mind was racing, connecting the dots. Captain Marcus Hale. Lila knew that name. He was the precinct commander. If Harlan was bragging about bringing seized assets directly to Hale's attention, the corruption went straight to the top of the precinct. They were not just dirty street cops. They were part of an organized racketeering enterprise masquerading as law enforcement. When they arrived at the precinct, the atmosphere was grim. The smell of cheap pine cleaner poorly masked the scent of vomit and stale sweat. Lila was paraded through the bullpen. A few other officers looked up, but mostly they ignored her. This was routine. This was a machine that chewed up marginalized citizens and spit out statistics and seized cash. They hauled her to the booking desk. Officer Harlan stood next to her, filling out the arrest report with agonizing slowness, thoroughly enjoying his power trip. "Name?" the booking sergeant asked, barely looking up from his ancient computer terminal. "Lila Kane," she lied smoothly. "Address?" She gave them the address of her federal safe house. After her fingerprints were taken, a tense moment followed as Lila knew the DEA had scrubbed her prints from the National Criminal Database and flagged them to redirect to a secure federal server if run by local law enforcement. She was stripped of her belongings, her phone, her wallet, her shoelaces. "I get a phone call," Leela said quietly as Carver grabbed her arm to lead her to holding. Yeah, you will get your call, constitutional scholar," Carver mocked. They placed her in a holding cell that smelled of urine and rust. There was a payphone bolted to the concrete wall. Lila waited until the guards had walked back down the corridor before picking up the receiver. She did not dial a lawyer. She dialed a highly encrypted Washington, D.C. number. It rang twice. Holt. A deep, gruff voice answered. It was Julian Holt, her DEA handler and assistant special agent in charge. "Hey, Uncle Julian. It is Lila. I ran into some trouble tonight." There was a half-second pause on the line as Holt caught the coded language. "Where are you, Lila?" "I am currently enjoying the hospitality of the Oak Haven 12th Precinct. Officers Harlan and Carver were kind enough to offer me a ride. They also found 2 ounces of crystal meth in my trunk." A heavy silence fell over the line. "Did they break your cover?" Holt asked, his voice suddenly sharp, protective. "No," Lila whispered, keeping her eyes on the corridor. "They think I am a civilian. They planted it, Julian." I watched Carver pull it from his own vest and pretend he found it in my trunk. They are talking about civil asset forfeiture and kicking the seizure up to Captain Hale. She could hear Holt typing furiously on his end. "Those stupid, arrogant sons of guns," Holt muttered. "Are you safe?" "For now, but I am going to let this play out. Lila, we can have a federal tactical team kick the doors of that precinct down and pull you out." "No," Lila hissed urgently. "No, Julian. If you pull me out now, we burn the months of work I have done on the Ironwood pipeline, and we only get Harlan and Carver. I want the whole precinct. I want Captain Hale. I want the DA if they are in on it. Let them process me. Let them bring me to court." Holt sighed heavily. "You are playing a dangerous game, Lila. If you get lost in county lockup, I will not be able to. Get the U.S. Attorney on standby. Subpoena the dashcam and body cam footage from their cruiser before it mysteriously corrupts. Get a warrant for Harlan and Carver's personal bank accounts and phone records. And Julian. Yeah. Make sure I get a court date fast. Let them walk right up to the judge and perjure themselves. Let them dig their own graves on the official record." "All right," Holt agreed reluctantly. "I will coordinate with the Department of Justice. We will have an airtight federal indictment, ready to unseal the second they take the stand. Sit tight, Agent Kane. And be careful. Leela hung up the phone. She sat down on the hard metal bench of the cell, staring at the peeling gray paint on the bars. For the first time all night, a genuine smile spread across her face. The hours that followed were a blur of calculated indignities. She was transferred to county jail, processed in an orange jumpsuit, and subjected to the harsh reality of the very system she had spent her life trying to clean up from the inside. She met with an exhausted public defender named Clara Holt, who barely looked at her file. "Look, Leela," Clara had said through the plexiglass partition, 2 ounces is a trafficking charge. They have you dead to rights on the police report. The cops say you were erratic. They smelled weed, found the meth. It is a mandatory minimum of 10 years. The DA is offering 4 if you plead guilty today. I strongly advise you to take it. I am completely innocent, Lila said calmly. I want to go to trial. I want a preliminary hearing, and I want those officers on the stand under oath. Clara looked at her with a mixture of pity and frustration. You do not understand how Oak Haven works. Cops like Harlan and Carver, the judge believes them. If you fight this, you will lose, and you will do a decade. Let us take our chances, Lila replied, her eyes locked onto the lawyer. Get me in front of Judge Beatrice Langford. The stage was set. The arrogant officers had laid their trap for a civilian, completely oblivious to the fact that they had just handed the federal government the noose to hang them with. Court was in session shortly thereafter, and Special Agent Lila Kane was ready to burn the 12th Precinct to the ground. The Oak Haven County Courthouse was a towering monolith of gray stone and faded glory, a place where hope was routinely ground into dust by an overburdened, apathetic justice system. Leela sat at the defense table, the heavy iron chains around her wrists and ankles clinking softly against the scarred wooden chair. She was clad in a scratchy, oversized orange jumpsuit. Her hair was pulled back into a messy knot. She looked every bit the defeated, terrified civilian she was pretending to be. Beside her, public defender Clara Holt furiously flipped through a manila folder, rubbing her temples. Okay, Lila, listen to me, Clara whispered urgently, not looking up from her sparse notes. Assistant District Attorney Elias Vale is gunning for you. He is tight with the 12th Precinct. They are treating this as a slam-dunk trafficking case. If we do not present a solid defense, which we do not have, Judge Beatrice Langford is going to bind you over for trial and deny bail. It is not too late to take the plea. I am not pleading guilty to a crime I did not commit, Leela replied, her voice maintaining a slight, engineered tremble. I want to hear them say it under oath. You are making a massive mistake, Clara sighed, sitting back just as the bailiff bellowed for the courtroom to rise. Judge Beatrice Langford swept into the room, her black robes billowing. She was a woman deeply entrenched in the local political machine, known for her harsh sentencing and unquestioning trust in local law enforcement. She banged her gavel, her eyes sweeping over the docket with visible exhaustion. Case number 44092, State of Ohio, versus Lila Kane, Judge Langford droned. Possession with intent to distribute a Schedule II controlled substance. Is the state ready? Ready, Your Honor, Assistant District Attorney Elias Vale said, standing up and buttoning his tailored suit jacket. Vale was young, ambitious, and possessed a smug certainty that made Lila's blood boil. "Defense is ready, Your Honor," Clara said, her voice lacking the booming confidence of the prosecutor. "Proceed, Mr. Vale," Langford ordered. "The state calls Officer Harlan Voss to the stand." Lila watched intensely as Harlan strutted down the center aisle of the courtroom. He was not in his patrol uniform today. He wore a sharp gray suit, looking every bit the upright, reliable servant of the law. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the whole truth, and took his seat in the witness box. He did not even glance at Lila. She was beneath his notice, just another stepping stone for his career and his illicit wallet. Vale approached the podium. "Officer Voss, can you describe the events that led to the arrest of the defendant that night?" Harlan leaned into the microphone, his voice calm and authoritative. "Yes, sir. My partner, Officer Lang, and I were on routine patrol in the South District. During the stop, I observed a 2012 Chevrolet Malibu traveling eastbound on Miller Avenue. The vehicle was swerving erratically, crossing the double yellow line twice. Perjury count 1, Lila noted in her mind. Her driving had been flawless. "Did you initiate a traffic stop?" Vale asked. "I did." Upon approaching the driver's side window, I asked the defendant for her license and registration. She appeared highly agitated, sweating profusely despite the cold weather. It was at this time that I detected the strong, distinct odor of unburned marijuana emanating from the cabin of the vehicle. Perjury count 2. Based on your training and experience, did this give you probable cause to search the vehicle? "It did, sir," Harlan answered smoothly. I asked the defendant to step out of the car. My partner conducted a search of the trunk. Tucked beneath the spare tire compartment, Officer Lang discovered a clear plastic bag containing a crystalline substance which later field tested positive for methamphetamine, approximately 60 grams. Vale turned to the judge. "Thank you, officer. Nothing further." Clara stood up for cross-examination, her posture defensive. "Officer Voss, is it not true that there is no dashcam video of my client crossing the yellow line?" "The dashcam was malfunctioning, ma'am." "A known issue with their cruiser," Harlan lied effortlessly. A practiced excuse he had undoubtedly used a dozen times before. "And you found no marijuana in the car?" "Correct. The substance that supposedly gave you probable cause. Suspects often dispose of contraband before we can secure the vehicle, counselor, but the smell was undeniable." Harlan smiled, a sickeningly sweet expression of false patience. Judge Langford interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "Miss Holt, the officer's testimony regarding probable cause is well established. Move on." Leila sat silently, her face a mask of despair, but her mind was calculating every syllable. She watched as Officer Carver Lang took the stand next, mirroring Harlan's lies perfectly. Lang described finding the drugs, explicitly stating under oath that the methamphetamine was physically in Lila's trunk when he opened it, perjury count 3. Falsifying official records, deprivation of rights under color of law. The trap was fully set. The state of Ohio had just put 2 corrupt officers on the stand, and they had willingly, arrogantly, perjured themselves on the official court record to frame an innocent woman. They had dug the grave. All Leila had to do now was push them in. "The state rests its preliminary case, Your Honor," Elias Valey announced loudly, returning to his table with a triumphant smirk. Given the severe nature of the charges, the overwhelming physical evidence, and the sworn testimony of two highly decorated officers, the state requests that the defendant be bound over for trial. Furthermore, we request that bail be denied. The defendant has no deep ties to this community and poses a severe flight risk. Judge Langford adjusted her reading glasses, peering down her nose at Lila. The courtroom was dead silent. Harlan and Carver sat in the front row of the gallery, leaning back, arms crossed, enjoying the show, the moment the cage slammed shut. "Ms. Holt," Judge Langford said, her tone laced with boredom, "does the defense have anything to add before I make my ruling?" Clara stood up, her shoulders slumped. "Your Honor, we ask for reasonable bail. My client has no prior criminal record. 60 grams of methamphetamine is not a victimless first-time offense, Counselor," Langford snapped, picking up her gavel. "Based on the testimony presented, I find probable cause that a crime was committed. I am binding the defendant over for trial. Bail is hereby." Then bang. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom flew open with such force that they bounced off the wood-paneled walls. The loud crack echoed like a gunshot, causing Judge Langford to drop her gavel, and the bailiff to jump toward his holster. Striding down the center aisle was a tall, imposing man in a sharp navy blue suit. Behind him were 4 men and women wearing tactical vests emblazoned with 3 massive yellow letters, FBI. Trailing slightly behind them was Julian Holt, his face a mask of controlled fury. Elias Vale spun around, his face flushing with anger. "What is the meaning of this? This is a closed preliminary hearing." He cleared his throat. "Bailiff, remove these men." The man in the navy suit did not even look at Vale. He walked straight past the prosecution table, stopping just before the wooden gate that separated the gallery from the well of the court. He reached into his breast pocket and flipped open a leather credential case, flashing a gold badge that caught the harsh fluorescent light. "Harlan Brock, Assistant United States Attorney for the Northern District," the man announced, his voice vibrating with authority that dwarfed the entire room. "And I am afraid, Judge Langford, that the state of Ohio will have to suspend these proceedings immediately." Judge Langford stood up, utterly bewildered. "Mr. Brock, what in God's name is the federal government doing interrupting my courtroom? This is a local drug trafficking matter." Brock smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered its prey. "With all due respect, Your Honor, it is absolutely not. We are here to execute federal arrest warrants, and we are here to take custody of the defendant." Vale scoffed, stepping forward. "You want to adopt the case federally? Fine. The DEA can have her. She is a high-level distributor." In the front row, Officers Harlan and Carver exchanged nervous glances. Federal adoption of a case meant federal scrutiny. Their comfortable, corrupt little bubble was suddenly under threat. Harlan began to stand up, quietly inching toward the exit. "Nobody leaves this room," Brock commanded, snapping his fingers. 2 FBI agents immediately stepped in front of the double doors, resting their hands on their duty belts. Harlan froze, his face suddenly paling. Brock turned his attention back to the bench. "Your Honor, there has been a massive misunderstanding here today. We are not here to adopt a prosecution against the defendant. We are here to dismiss all state charges against her with prejudice." Vale practically choked. "Dismiss. On what grounds?" "On the grounds, Mr. Vale, that the evidence sitting in your lockup was supplied by the Oak Haven Police Department's own evidence room, checked out by Officer Lang, hours before the arrest, and planted in the vehicle. The courtroom erupted into a low murmur. Judge Langford banged her gavel, her face turning red. "Mr. Brock, that is an outrageous accusation. You are accusing two sworn officers of—" "I am not accusing them, Your Honor. I am indicting them," Brock interrupted fiercely. He slammed a thick sealed manila envelope onto the ADA's table. "Federal grand jury indictment, wire fraud, deprivation of rights under color of law, falsifying federal records, perjury, and conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine under the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act." Carver let out a strangled gasp. Harlan looked like he was going to be sick. Furthermore, Brock continued, his eyes locking onto Harlan, the dashcam in their cruiser was not malfunctioning. Our technical division remotely activated the system. We have crystal clear 4K audio and video of Officer Harlan and Officer Carver explicitly discussing their quota, discussing the theft of the vehicle for a family member's dealership, and discussing planting the narcotics. Clara Holt, the public defender, dropped her pen. She stared at Lila, whose posture had completely changed. The terrified, slumped civilian was gone. Lila sat perfectly straight, her eyes sharp and cold as ice. "Your Honor," Vale stammered, his arrogance evaporating into sheer panic. Who is this woman?" Lila calmly stood up. The clinking of her chains was the only sound in the dead silent room. She looked directly at Harlan and Carver, her voice projecting with a practiced federal command. "My name is Special Agent Lila Kane, Drug Enforcement Administration," she said clearly. "And you two boys just perjured yourselves straight into federal prison." The color completely drained from Harlan's face. Carver's knees literally buckled, and he collapsed back onto the wooden pew of the gallery. They had not just framed a citizen, they had kidnapped, falsely imprisoned, and framed an undercover federal agent who had been watching their every move. "Agent Kane," Brock said, nodding respectfully to Lila. He turned to the FBI agents at the doors. "Cuff them. Take them out of here." As the FBI agents swarmed Harlan and Carver, stripping them of their weapons and ratcheting federal steel around their wrists, Lila looked up at the judge. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had completely inverted. The trap had not just closed, it had shattered the entire corrupt foundation of the 12th Precinct. The heavy iron chains fell from Lila's wrists with a loud, satisfying clatter, hitting the linoleum floor of the courthouse holding room. Julian Holt, her DEA handler, stood before her, holding out a dark navy windbreaker with the bright yellow letters DEA printed across the back. In his other hand, he held her Sig Sauer P229 service weapon and her gold federal badge clipped to a leather lanyard. "You cut that one a little close, Kane," Holt said, a rare, genuine smile breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. Lila slipped out of the oversized, scratchy orange jumpsuit, under which she had been allowed to wear a plain gray t-shirt and jeans. After the initial booking, she pulled the DEA jacket over her shoulders. The familiar weight of the nylon felt like armor after days of engineered vulnerability. She holstered her weapon at her hip and dropped the badge around her neck. "I needed them on the record, Julian," Lila replied, adjusting her belt. Harlan and Carver were just the symptoms. Captain Hale is the disease, and now that we have the arresting officers locked in a perjury trap, the dominoes are lined up perfectly. Assistant United States Attorney Harlan Brock walked into the holding room, loosening his tie. Agent Kane, the warrants are signed. Judge Langford is currently having a minor cardiac event in her chambers, trying to figure out how she missed a federal undercover operation in her own courtroom. But the local DAs entirely neutralized. The FBI SWAT teams are staged 2 blocks from the 12th precinct. "Let us not keep Captain Hale waiting," Lila said, her eyes hardening into a cold, focused stare. "He is expecting a phone call about my bail being denied and my car being prepped for the auction block." Moments later, a convoy of 6 unmarked black Subarus and 2 heavily armored FBI Bearcats tore through the rain-slicked streets of Oak Haven. They did not use their sirens. This was not a rescue mission. It was a decapitation strike. The 12th precinct was a crumbling brick fortress that had stood since the late 1970s. It was a place where the community was supposed to find protection, but under Captain Marcus Hale's command, it had become a localized cartel subsidiary. Lila rode in the lead SUV with Holt. As they pulled up to the front steps of the precinct, she felt a profound sense of closure. She had spent several months eating terrible diner food, living in a drafty safe house, and memorizing the faces of the men who were poisoning the city. Today, it ended. "Execute," Holt spoke into his radio. The doors of the tactical vehicles flew open. Dozens of federal agents swarmed the building. Lila took the point, flanked by heavily armed FBI tactical operators. She pushed through the double-glass doors of the precinct, her badge highly visible. At the front desk, Sergeant Victor Hale, the same booking sergeant who had lethargically processed Lila days earlier, looked up from his paperwork. The color instantly drained from his face as he took in the sea of federal windbreakers and tactical rifles pouring into his lobby. His eyes widened comically when they landed on Lila. "Federal agents, secure the building. Hands away from your weapons," Holt's voice boomed through the bullpen, echoing off the high-stained ceilings. Local officers froze at their desks. Some instinctively reached for their sidearms, but the overwhelming presence of federal lasers painting their chests made them reconsider immediately. One by one, they slowly raised their hands, stepping away from their keyboards and radios. Lila did not stop in the bullpen. She knew the layout. She marched straight down the central corridor, heading for the commander's office at the far end. 2 FBI agents kept pace behind her. Through the frosted glass of the office door, Lila could see the silhouette of Captain Marcus Hale. He was on the phone, likely yelling at someone, completely oblivious to the hostile takeover happening feet away. Lila did not knock. She raised her boot and kicked the door right at the handle. The locking mechanism shattered, and the heavy wooden door swung inward, crashing against the wall. Captain Hale, a broad-shouldered man with a thick gray mustache and a custom-tailored uniform, dropped his desk phone. He leapt to his feet, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "What the hell is the meaning of this?" Hale roared, his hand dropping toward the Glock on his hip. "I would not," Lila warned, her hand resting casually on her own weapon, her eyes locked onto his. Hale froze, his hand hovering inches from his holster. He looked at the 2 FBI agents, their rifles at the low ready, and then his gaze snapped to Lila. He squinted, trying to place her face. "Who the hell are you?" "Special Agent Lila Kane, DEA," she announced, stepping fully into the office. "Days ago, your boys Harlan and Carver booked me under the name Lila Kane. They planted 2 ounces of methamphetamine in my trunk to meet your seizure quotas. Hale's jaw tightened. A flicker of realization, followed rapidly by sheer panic, crossed his eyes, but he quickly masked it with aggressive bluster. I do not know what you are talking about. If my officers made a bad caller, that is an internal affairs issue. You have no jurisdiction to breach my precinct like this. We are not here for a bad caller, Marcus, Holt said, stepping into the room behind Lila. We are here for the Ironwood Pipeline. At the mention of the cartel's local distribution network, Hale's false bravado shattered completely. He sank back into his heavy leather chair as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. We have the wiretaps, Captain, Lila continued, walking slowly toward his desk. We have the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. We know you have been taking a 30% cut from Ronan Slate to ensure his couriers are never pulled over in your district, and we know you have been using the civil asset forfeiture program to launder the vehicles for Slate's operation. You cannot prove any of that, Hale stammered, his voice dropping an octave, lacking all its previous authority. I do not have to, Leela said coldly. Harlan and Carver are already in federal custody. They are currently sitting in separate rooms at the federal building, and right now, AUSA, Brock is offering them a race. Whoever gives you up first gets 20 years instead of life. How loyal do you think Harlan is when he is facing a Supermax facility? Leela leaned over Hale's desk, planting her hands firmly on the polished wood. Stand up, Captain. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Hale looked at the framed commendations on his wall. Decades of a career, he had systematically rotted from the inside out. Slowly, with trembling hands, he stood up and turned around. The sound of the federal handcuffs ratcheting closed around the wrists of the precinct. Captain echoed loudly in the quiet office. It was the sound of a corrupt empire collapsing. As they marched Hale out through his own bullpen, past his stunned and terrified subordinates, the absolute silence of the 12th precinct spoke volumes. The untouchables had just been touched. The interrogation rooms at the federal building in downtown Oak Haven were stark, windowless boxes designed to strip away comfort and induce psychological pressure. There were no good cop, bad cop routines here. There was only the crushing, inevitable weight of the United States government. Officer Harlan Voss sat at a metal table, still wearing the sharp gray suit he had worn to court just hours earlier, but the suit looked rumpled now, the tie discarded, the top button open. He was sweating heavily, staring at the stainless steel rings embedded in the table. The heavy steel door clicked open, and Lila walked in, followed by AUSA Harlan Brock. Lila dropped a thick 4-inch binder onto the table. It hit the metal with a loud thud that made Harlan jump. "Hello again, Harlan," Lila said, her voice perfectly even. She pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "It has been a long day. You want some water? Coffee?" Harlan looked up, his eyes bloodshot and darting. "I want my union rep. I want a lawyer." "Your union rep does not have security clearance for a federal RICO case," Brock stated flatly, remaining standing near the door. "And your lawyer, Mr. Arthur Pendleton, is currently outside. But before we bring him in, I thought I would give you a preview of the discovery material, just to save us all some time." Lila opened the heavy binder. "Let us review the tape, Harlan." She placed a small digital recorder on the table and hit play. The audio was crystal clear. It was the dash cam recording from their cruiser. Easy caller. Captain Hale is going to love this. That puts us 3 busts over for the month. We can get it processed for civil asset forfeiture soon. Lila paused the recording. That is conspiracy to commit wire fraud and deprivation of rights. You established premeditation on tape. Harlan swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I was just blowing off steam. Carver found the drugs. I did not know he planted them. Leela smiled, a cold, sharp smile that offered no quarter. Do not try to play the fool, Harlan. You checked that meth out of the evidence locker hours before you pulled me over. We have Sergeant Victor Hale on video handing Carver the bag while you stood watch at the door. But let us move past my arrest. That is small potatoes. She flipped a page in the binder. Let us talk about Ronan Slate. At the mention of the cartel enforcer's name, the last vestige of defiance drained from Harlan's face. He looked physically ill. We have been monitoring your burner phone for months, Lila continued, her voice relentless. We have dozens of recorded phone calls between you and Slate. We have you negotiating the release of his lieutenants in exchange for cash drops behind the old rail yard. We have you supplying Slate with the home addresses of rival gang members, 2 of whom turned up dead in the river last month. I never wanted anyone killed, Harlan whispered, burying his face in his hands. Hale set it up. Hale told us it was the only way to keep the peace in the district. You let Slate operate, and he keeps the violence down. And you got rich doing it, Brock added, stepping forward. Here is the reality of your situation, Mr. Voss. You are looking at 2 counts of perjury, civil rights violations, kidnapping under color of law, and accessory to murder as part of a continuing criminal enterprise. That is a mandatory life sentence in a federal penitentiary. Harlan began to hyperventilate. The reality of his karma was hitting him with the force of a freight train. He was not the apex predator he thought he was. He was just a disposable pawn in a game he fundamentally misunderstood. However, Brock continued, his voice dropping into a deceptive transactional calm, your partner, Carver Lang, is currently in Room B. Agent Holt is having the exact same conversation with him. The first man to sign a proper agreement, waive his right to trial, and agree to testify against Captain Hale, and Ronan Slate gets a recommendation of 15 years. The other man gets life. Brock tapped his watch. You have a brief moment to decide before I walk out of this room and give Lang the deal. I will sign. Harlan blurted out instantly, his self-preservation instinct overriding whatever twisted loyalty he held for his badge. Tears streamed down his face, ruining his tough guy facade entirely. I will sign it right now. I will give you Hale. I will give you Slate. I will tell you where the ledgers are hidden in Hale's basement. Leela closed the binder. The trap had not just caught the mice, it had caught the Rat King. Good choice, Lila said softly, standing up. Your lawyer will be in shortly. She walked out of the interrogation room, stepping into the cool, quiet hallway where Holt was leaning against the wall, drinking a terrible cup of break-room coffee. Did he bite? Holt asked. Swallowed the hook whole, Leela replied, leaning back against the wall next to him, finally letting out a long, exhausted breath. He gave up Hale's ledgers. We have the paper trail. Lang flipped too, Holt noted, chuckling darkly. Cried like a baby. They tripped over each other, trying to sell Hale out. Simultaneously, across town, an FBI tactical team was kicking in the door of a luxury penthouse overlooking the river. Ronan Slate, The brutal enforcer of the Ironwood pipeline was pulled from his bed in his silk pajamas and thrown onto the hardwood floor. The empire built on poisoned communities, false arrests, and dirty badges was collapsing in a matter of hours. When Captain Marcus Hale was finally brought into the interrogation room, he did not say a word. He had watched Harlan's lawyer and Carver's lawyer rush into the building, and he knew exactly what it meant. The blue wall of silence had crumbled the moment federal prison time was put on the table. Hale sat at the metal table, staring blankly at the wall. He had ruled the 12th precinct like a feudal lord, destroying the lives of countless innocent people to line his own pockets and advance his career. He had approved the framing of a black woman, thinking she was a nobody, a ghost the system would not care about. Lila walked into Hale's room alone. She did not bring the binder. She did not offer a deal. "Your officers gave you up, Marcus," Lila said simply, standing near the door. "We found the ledgers in your basement safe. We have Ronan Slate in custody. It is over." Hale looked up at her, his eyes hollow and defeated. "What happens now?" "Now?" Lila asked, her voice echoing the absolute, unyielding force of justice. "Now, you face the same system you manipulated for years. No deals, no early parole. You are going to spend the rest of your life in a 6x8 cell, surrounded by the very people you put away." She turned the handle to leave, but paused, looking back over her shoulder. "You thought I was just an easy target," Leela said, her voice dropping to a quiet, lethal whisper. "Next time you decide to play God with someone's life, remember that you never know who you are pulling over." Leela stepped out of the room, letting the heavy steel door slam shut behind her. The sound echoed down the hallway, the final, undeniable gavel strike of hard, righteous karma. The Ironwood pipeline was broken, the corrupt cops were caged, and Agent Lila Kane was finally going home. The sentencing hearing for the Oak Haven Three was not held in the small, cramped courtroom where Lila had first been shackled. Instead, due to the sheer magnitude of the scandal and the hundreds of cases now under review, the proceedings were moved to the federal courthouse in the heart of the city. The air in the courtroom was thick with a different kind of tension today. It was not the stifling weight of corruption, but the electric anticipation of a community about to see the impossible. The law finally being applied to those who wore the badge. Lila Kane sat in the front row, no longer the defendant, and no longer in her DEA windbreaker. She wore a tailored black suit, her eyes fixed forward. Behind her sat dozens of families. People like the parents of Leo Carter and the widow of Darnell Wright. Men who had been sent to prison on the word of Harlan and Carver, whose lives had been derailed by phantom smells and planted evidence. Judge Beatrice Langford, a woman known for her unwavering adherence to the letter of the law, peered over her spectacles at the three men standing in the well of the court. Captain Marcus Hale looked like a ghost of his former self. His uniform had been replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting suit. His pension had been frozen, his assets seized under the very civil forfeiture laws he had abused for a decade, and his wife, Linda, had filed for divorce the week the indictment went public. He had lost his house, his reputation, and his power. Beside him, Harlan Voss and Carver Lang stood with their heads bowed. The arrogance that had defined them on that rainy night on Miller Avenue was gone, replaced by the hollow, trembling fear of men who knew exactly what waited for them on the other side of the stone walls. In her 2 decades on the bench, Judge Langford began, her voice echoing through the silent chamber. I have seen many criminals. I have seen men driven by desperation, by greed, and by rage. But rarely have I seen such a systemic, cold-blooded betrayal of the public trust. You did not just break the law, you weaponized it. You turned the shield into a sword and used it to prey on the very people you swore to protect. She turned her gaze to Hale. Marcus Hale, for your role in orchestrating a racketeering enterprise and conspiring with the Ironwood Pipeline cartel, I sentence you to 35 years in federal prison. There is no parole in the federal system. You will likely die behind those bars. A collective gasp, followed by a sob of relief from the gallery, rippled through the room. Hale's knees buckled, but the federal marshals held him upright. Harlan Voss and Carver Lang, the judge continued, despite your cooperation, the nature of your crimes against Agent Kane and the citizens of Oakhaven demands a severe response. For perjury, kidnapping under color of law, and distribution of narcotics, you are each sentenced to 20 years. As the marshals stepped forward to lead them away, the hard karma Lila had envisioned reached its final, brutal crescendo. Because of the nature of their crimes and the high-profile fallout, the Bureau of Prisons did not send Harlan and Carver to a cops-only facility. Due to overcrowding and the complexity of the RICO case, they were processed into a high-security wing of a regional penitentiary, the same facility where several of the Ironwood Pipeline lieutenants they had double-crossed were currently serving their own time. As Harlan was let out, he caught Lila's eye one last time. He looked terrified, realizing that the blue wall he had hidden behind was now a cage, and the people he had stepped on to climb his ladder were now his neighbors. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. A thin sliver of sunlight broke through the gray Ohio clouds. Lila stood on the top step, watching the media swarm AUSA Brock. Julian Holt walked up beside her, handing her a fresh cup of coffee. You did good, Lila, Holt said quietly. The DOJ is reviewing over 400 cases handled by the 12th Precinct. They have already vacated dozens of convictions. People are going home to their families tonight because you took that ride in the back of the cruiser. It is a start, Julian, Lila replied, looking out at the city. But there is always another 12th Precinct. There is always another Hale. Maybe. But next time they will be wondering if the person they are pulling over is someone like you. Lila nodded, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She thought about the Malibu, her car, which had been returned to her that morning, freshly detailed and smelling of nothing but clean upholstery. She thought about the real Lila Kane, the name she had used, and hoped the real women like her in the city felt a little safer tonight. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from the field office, a new lead on a shipment coming in through the rail yards. Back to work, Holt asked, noticing her expression. Always, Lila said. She turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into the crowd. She was not a victim, and she was not just a black woman in a Chevy Malibu anymore. She was the person who had brought an entire empire of corruption to its knees, a silent guardian who knew that sometimes the only way to find the truth is to let the darkness think it has already won. This story serves as a powerful reminder that while corruption can hide behind a badge and power can be abused, justice has a way of finding the light. Officers Harlan and Carver thought they were picking on a helpless civilian, but they ended up handing the keys to their own prison cells to a woman who was 3 steps ahead of them the entire time. Their easy caller became their ultimate downfall, proving that karma does not just catch up, it strikes with the full weight of the law when you least expect it.